So I started my new high school my junior year, and I'm now ending senior year. I didn't know anyone when I started except my friend Sarah. I was really quiet and didn't really talk to anyone my first couple of weeks, but I did notice this kid, Victor, that always stared at me in my 7th period, but I didn't think about it. He started talking to me about a month into the school year, and he seemed really nice, and we became close friends really fast. He would pick me up and take me to school, and then he would take me home from school every day. There were some red flags, but at the time, I just thought that was his personality. This was before my stalker incident, so I wasn't that wary of people at this point. Anyways, he did some weird things like staring at me in our classes together and telling me I'm beautiful all the time. I just figured he was super nice. Around Valentine's Day, he picked me up, and before we got out of the car to walk into school, he told me that he had a present for me. Normally, this wouldn't be that weird, but we still weren't super good friends to the point where we would just normally give each other other gifts. And I had told him before that we were just friends. Anyways, it was like a $30 shirt, and I tried giving it back to him, or at least paying for it because I felt really bad, but he wouldn't accept anything. Anyway, fast forward to summer, we were in a summer school class together with this girl, Larissa. He got kicked out of class for smoking. Seriously, who smokes in class, by the way? After 2 weeks, so Larissa and I got to be good friends. She knew Victor and all of his friends as well and talked to them regularly. Well, she and I were at her family's barbecue, and she was telling me how Victor was really creeping her out. Apparently, he had shown up at her house at 1 a.m. a couple of nights before, and knocked on her window until she opened it and begged her to kiss him. And when she declined, he offered her money to have sex with him. She shut her window and he repeatedly called her phone until she finally had to turn it off because he would not stop calling. Also, his birthday was a week before that happened, and I had spent all of that day with my mom. I only texted him in the morning to say happy birthday. He had told Larissa and a few of his other friends that we had sex on his birthday, and after that went to dinner. I have no idea why he would say that, given the fact that I don't even think we had ever hugged, and I also wasn't even with him that day. About a month after that, I went to Warped Tour with my stepbrother and friend Mark. My friend Allie, a mutual friend of Victor and me, couldn't make it, so I told him I would get him some stuff. Well, Allie was showing Victor what I got him, and Victor said, "Oh, I know. I went with her." And then he made up all of these events that happened when he apparently went with me to Warped. A few days after that, Allie, Victor, and I were hanging out at the park when I mentioned that I had gotten back together with my boyfriend. Victor got up and started screaming at me and called me an idiot and demanded Allie drive him home. I didn't feel comfortable being in the car, so I waited for Allie to drop him off and come back to the park to get me. When he got back, he told me how Victor told him how he would like to kill the boyfriend I got back with and how he punched the side of his house. I stopped talking to Victor after that, but I was still friends with Allie. On the 4th of July, Allie and I went to a little kickback with all of his and Victor's friends. Victor wasn't there. We were all talking and the subject got to how Victor was acting weird. All of his friends were telling me how he scared them, but they didn't want to stop talking to him because they were honestly afraid of what he would do. On the way home, Allie told me that Victor described in detail to him all the time his fantasies of killing people and how he would do it and who was on his list. I later found out from one of his friends that had been there that he had just gotten into a fight and he tried to kill the guy. It got to the point that 3 people had to rip Victor off after he told the guy that he was going to kill him and pulled out a knife and waved it at him. I should have mentioned earlier he was also a compulsive liar. He said that he'd been in jail for 5 years when he was 12, which didn't make sense because he just turned 18 in late 2013. Anyways, I recently ran into him while I was out getting coffee, and not wanting to be rude, I asked him how he'd been doing. The first thing he said was, "Pretty good. My dog died," but he said it with no emotion, and he was sort of smiling even. Also out of nowhere, he said something about hitting his former best friend Dakota. He told me with a straight face how he was going to beat him to a pulp and that he wanted to kill him. I made an excuse about having to leave and he didn't say anything. He just went to his car and slammed the door and drove away way too fast. I have no idea what his problem is, but he really freaks me out. I also see him driving near my house sometimes, even though apparently he works 3 jobs. Allie tells me that he still talks about me and asks about me all the time. After having a stalker, this really freaks me out. Edit. I forgot to mention one of the weirdest things that I think he's ever done. I still don't know if it was him. He called me late one night and he asked if I wanted to hang out, and I said no because I had to be up early for school the next day. Then he told me, "Okay, I'll just sneak in." And I was like, whatever, bye. Since I have a 2nd story room, I sleep with my window cracked at times. I also don't have a screen at my window. Well, it's easy to get on my roof if you really try. I woke up at around 2 a.m., about an hour after I told Victor that I didn't want to hang out. I woke up to noises on my roof and I just thought it was weird, so I tried to go back to sleep. Then I heard my window being opened and I froze. I was facing my window and all I could see was a hand and a dark figure. Then I heard a cough and saw the window being slid open a little more. My dog started barking and then I heard, oh shit. I heard whoever it was jump off the roof and land on my driveway. I was beyond scared and now I always sleep with my windows locked. I used to live in a seaside town in California. Living there most of my life, I had seen a lot of strange people but never really had a bad experience until the story I'm about to share. Perhaps it was because we were young that we never paid attention to things around us. Things were probably happening, but we never saw the horrors of our own town. All I know is that we felt safe all the time, even though we shouldn't have. I was 14, and both of my friends had been the same age. One of my friends, Sarah, had been my best friend for about 4 years prior and is still even my best friend today, even after 14 long years. My other friend Alice had known me for only a year or two prior and was new to our shenanigans but fit in all the same. You see, my best friend Sarah and I had been avid role players since the day we had met. I remember all the recesses we spent in elementary school pretending the play structures were castles and that dragons resided in them. When we met Alice, we introduced her to this and she fell in love almost instantly. All of us had created a world where we could be anyone and do anything. As time had gone on, we began LARPing by dressing up in capes and costumes as the characters we had created. We even collected sticks that swung around and sword fought with, accidentally ending a few times in bruises and scrapes. Role-playing had become a large part of our friendship, and even now we still partake in some of this, but as life goes, when you grow up, you rarely find the time to do things. Back then though, whenever we could, we would band together and go on our own adventure, but time was always limited unless we had a sleepover together at one of our houses. Most of the time, we would all stay at my place. I think why we chose to be at my place so often was because of the freedom that we had. My father wasn't a terrible father, but he wasn't the most traditional parent either. He let me and my friends do whatever we chose to do, as long as we weren't getting ourselves into trouble. Because of this, we would walk around at night a lot because it was quiet and the streets were mostly empty of people. Many of our role-playing sessions mostly took place after dark for years without incident. Sure, my friends' parents didn't like it when they realized that we had been doing this, but we had done it anyway. All the time we had specific places that were designated for perfect RP session spots, when we didn't feel like wandering. One of them had been the park near my apartment. This park, when you walked into it, had a hill with a walkway that led down into a sandy play area below. This play area had swings, a slide, and some upright pipe-looking things that looked like they could have been from Mario, but blue. But the one thing that I always thought was strange about this play area was the giant cement sculpture that was meant to be climbed on and inside of. This sculpture had holes all over the place, even ones on the bottom where you could climb up underneath it. It kind of reminded me of one of those sculptures that Delia Deetz had in Beetlejuice. Lastly, beyond that playground, down a little hill, it flattened out into a field. This field was huge. It had a bathroom all the way at the other end opposite from the park, and was big enough that it contained 2 baseball diamonds. Because of the baseball areas, there were cages above the pitcher's mound, and the entire field was fenced on one side. The path that led to the play area continued on the other side of this fence, and the field was on the other. So as you could tell, this was a role player's perfect spot to go all out, especially with LARPing. And when it was at night when nobody was around, you could do whatever you wanted without being looked at funny or being told not to flail giant sticks around. So one crisp night, we 3 girls had a sleepover at my place like usual. We decided that that night was a great time to go out on an adventure. We threw on our capes and grabbed our sticks that I kept near my front door, and we headed out to that grand old park. It had already been dark at the time. The street lamps were glowing with their eerie golden glow above as we had made our way to the park, which had only been about 2 blocks away. When we reached the park, we made our way down the path while we talked excitedly about our game. I remember as we approached the top of the hill that overlooked the play area, I had the feeling that we weren't alone. But we continued into the park anyway, making our way down the hill. A moment after, I felt uneasy though. We noticed we weren't really alone. Seeing the strange sculpture from above on the walkway, we had seen a dark silhouette of a man sitting inside. This person looked large compared to us, and they certainly weren't giving off good vibes, although they weren't doing anything necessarily. Because of this, we decided to bypass the park and continue on through the giant grass field. At this point, all three of us continued on talking about our game. We didn't think anything of it. This park often had teenagers messing around at night drinking, or the random homeless person just trying to sleep or take a break. We had already made it about halfway across the large dark field when I had this nagging feeling to look behind us. I turned and saw the dark figure of the man we saw in the sculpture making his way down the small grassy hill onto the field. I told them both what was happening and they too looked behind, seeing the man walking. At that point, we all started to get uneasy. At this point, I had just hoped that he happened to be walking in the same direction, that this guy then just decided to get going somewhere for some reason, but nothing about it felt really that way, especially when the silhouette's pace began to quicken. With how rigidly this man walked and the strides he took, he seemed like he could have been on drugs and looking to possibly start trouble. He looked like he could start charging at us any moment. Thoughts of this guy mugging us or sexually assaulting us flooded my brain, but I tried to reassure myself that this guy would be really stupid attacking three girls, especially when they all had sticks the size of Gandalf's staff. We kept walking in the direction of the bathroom and decided among ourselves that we would stop at a picnic table not too far from it. I honestly don't remember why we decided to do this. I think we were trying to pretend we didn't notice this guy and play it cool. Or maybe it was because we wanted to be ready and facing this guy if he wanted to start something. Either way, the bench was sitting directly under one of the streetlights, so we were in direct view of anybody who could have been watching what might take place. Whatever it had been, this had been our plan. We kept looking behind us, and the man was getting closer and closer, gaining on us. This bench wasn't much further, but it felt like we were walking across a huge expanse. Although it was dark, we could see him doing something with one of his hands. At the time, I'm pretty sure I was afraid of him having a weapon, but as he got closer, I started to get the picture of what he might have been doing. At this, we had sped up our pace a bit, rounded out of the open gate on the fence, and made it to the bench. We quickly swiveled and sat on the bench so we were facing this guy. He made it to the gate and stopped at the opening. Now illuminated by the streetlight, we could see him. He was playing with himself. He was tall, thin, and almost completely bald. This guy had a blank 1,000-mile stare, and although this guy was touching himself, his eyes flashed murderously. This guy was most definitely tweaked out and thinking about doing something bad. But to our relief, the crazy pervert stood there for a minute looking at us, then just disappeared into the darkness towards the playground. We waited for a while until we saw the guy disappearing out of the park up the road, and far away before he moved from the bench. I could tell all of us were uncomfortable and kind of freaked out about what happened, but we kept making jokes about it. We joked about how he was rolling dice very intensely because he wanted to play an RPG with us. Yeah, we were kind of messed up kids. We were fully aware of what happened, we just didn't take it very seriously. After that, though, we decided to go back to my place because none of us felt like it was worth sticking around after that. Plus, the mood was utterly ruined. None of our parents heard about it after it happened, though, and things went on as normal. We started to go to that park less at night, and it never really felt the same after that. We talked about it now and again, but over time, we put it out of our minds. I remember for the longest time we normalized it, and in my mind, it kind of set in as not being that big of a deal, because nothing happened, you know. But even then, and after all of those jokes were made, looking back on it, it's really messed up. How we took it, what that guy did, and how stupid we were. But thankfully, we had those sticks, or who knows what the heck he would have done to us. It's scarier now to me than it was at the time it happened. To this day, I've never had another experience like that, and I have moved away from my childhood home. I hope that none of us have to go through something like that again. Creepy possible sex offender, tweaker in the park. Let's not meet again. I was a shy kid. In elementary school, I don't think I spoke to anybody unless spoken to, and even then, I was often so anxious about being perceived that I kept my replies short and spent the next few hours replaying the conversation in my head, hoping I didn't come off as weird. I had a lot of trouble with boys too, so it was no wonder that I spent a lot of time in the guidance counselor's office. My guidance counselor was a sweet younger woman. She and my mom got along well, and I even kept in contact with her through Facebook as I got older. She was truly awesome. By the time I got to high school, I had broken out of my shell a bit. I became a varsity competitive cheerleader, and I was in all AP/honors classes, and I was even the top ranked art student and president of the art club, and I dated a complete jerk. I truly got the complete high school experience. Now at my high school, there was an option to take tech classes at an applied learning center. They offered a ton of courses like cosmetology, CNA, automotive, etc. And it was truly a great tool for those not planning on college or who just wanted some technical skills before graduating high school. I wasn't able to take any courses at the tech school, but my boyfriend did. He took some sort of police course, and it happened to be taught by my elementary school guidance counselor's husband. Now, this was a very large man. I mean the most ripped man I've ever seen in my life. His arms were the size of my head, and that's not an exaggeration. Apparently, he was an arm wrestling champion at one time, and I wish I were joking, but I'm not. Over the few semesters my boyfriend had in his class, the two became pretty close. I guess he became sort of a mentor to him in a way, and since I knew his wife, we even ended up having dinner at his house. Looking back now, I have no idea why two teachers thought it was a good idea to invite two high school students to their house, but they did. They had two young daughters, probably around 5 and 7. They were also in competitive cheer, so I spent most of the evening talking to them. Dinner was uneventful, and I never thought twice about it, as odd as it was. Afterwards, my boyfriend's teacher followed me on Instagram, and he would like and comment on my pictures and occasionally message me. It was never about anything weird, and since he was my boyfriend's mentor and past guidance counselor's husband, I literally never thought twice about it. I remember him messaging me once to ask if I would come over sometime to give his daughters tumbling lessons, and I thought, wow, what a great idea. I was stupid. Now fast forward a year or so, I finally realized that my boyfriend was a jerk and dumped him. I would see his teacher at my cheer competitions, and he would still occasionally message me, but I didn't think that was weird since his daughters were into it too. I was sitting in AP Stats one day, goofing off in the back row with a friend of mine, when I heard my name called over the intercom. They wanted me to report to the principal's office. Almost simultaneously, my stepdad started texting me asking me weird questions about pictures that I did not understand. All of my anxiety came rushing back at once. I had never been to the principal's office before, and as I stood up to leave class, everybody stared at me. I walked into the office and I was surprised to see my mom standing there crying, a detective standing next to her, and a big yellow folder sitting on a desk in front of them. The folder was full of pictures of me, and they were found on my ex-boyfriend's teacher's phone. The folder was incredibly thick. He had been stalking me and I had no idea. I never opened the folder because I didn't want to know. After I left the office that day, I never heard another word about it except that he was fired. It almost feels like a fever dream, but it happened. I'm just glad I never went to his house to give his daughters tumbling lessons. So, to my ex-boyfriend's teacher and guidance counselor's husband, let's not ever meet again. I've decided to share a story from my childhood I believe is let's not meet material. This happened in the late 90s in a medium-sized town in New England. It was the end of summer. I had just turned 9. I had gotten a Nintendo 64 for my birthday, and I was locking some serious hours of GoldenEye and Mario 64 on this beautiful summer day turned evening. My friend had gotten 120 stars and met Yoshi already, and here I haven't even breached 70 when my mom came down the stairs. It was time to go pick up my younger brother from camp, and since my dad wasn't home from work yet, I had to go with her. I was mid-star here. I pleaded with her to let me stay home. No, you can't pause it. I won't answer the door. If somebody calls and you're in the shower, you'll call them right back. I'm not a baby. My mom had let me stay home alone during the day a couple of times. I knew all of the rules, but it was dark out and she didn't want to let me stay alone at night. I pleaded with her. Finally, knowing that my dad would be home in the next 30 minutes or so, she relented. Score. She must have run into my dad in the driveway because it couldn't have been more than a minute before I heard the garage door open and my dad walked in. It was time to go pick up my older brother from football practice. I paused my game. There was a 0% chance I could convince my dad to let me stay home, even for the 20 to 30 minutes it would take to scoop my brother. We drove to the field and watched the last 15 minutes of the practice under the lights. It would have been nearly 9 p.m. by the time we reached the driveway. Light poured out from the garage as the door went up. Whoa, did you guys see that? My brother exclaimed. Some guy just ran through our backyard. Our house was set back from the road and surrounded by woods, so there definitely shouldn't be anyone in the backyard. I thought my brother was trying to scare me, and presumably so did my dad because he told him to pipe down. It was just a shadow. We lived in a typical colonial house. The garage opened to a finished basement that was our game room. My dad and my brother went upstairs as I quickly shuffled back to my game. I flipped on the lights and immediately I noticed that the window pane on the door to the backyard had a big hole smashed through it. I called for my dad to come back downstairs. He went and checked the door. It was still closed and locked. He checked the rest of the basement. Another window that opened underneath our deck had a hole in it and a brick was lying on the floor. My brother and I were in shock as my dad grabbed the bat and checked the first and second floors. No other doors or windows were broken. Nothing was missing. My dad called the police and they showed up a couple minutes later. They checked around outside and they then led us out to the back patio and showed us what happened. Somebody had punched a hole through the door pane so they could reach in and unlock the door. They hadn't anticipated that it was actually a key-only deadbolt, meaning you needed a key to open the door from the inside as well. These used to be commonplace, but are no longer allowed because of the risk of trapping you in a fire. Next, he tried to kick the door in. There were clear footprints all over the door, but it held strong. After that didn't work, he had taken the screen out of the window under the deck, thrown a brick through the glass, undone the latch, and opened the window an inch or two. We must have interrupted him when we pulled into the driveway. My brother had actually seen a man run into the woods in our backyard. 2 more minutes and he would have been in. The really scary part is that all of our doors going in or out of the house were key-only deadbolts. If he would have gotten in and gone upstairs, if we'd gotten home 5 minutes later, he would have essentially been trapped in the house. He would have had to get past us to leave. We would have inevitably come face to face with the intruder as we went upstairs. Worse yet, he might have hidden somewhere in the house and tried to sneak out later or do who knows what. Imagine checking your closet as a 9-year-old and actually finding somebody. My mom and younger brother got home just as the police were finishing up. She told the cop that in the early afternoon, she had seen a guy that looked out of place walking down the street. He was a youngish white guy with long sandy blonde hair and a scruffy beard. The cops gave each other a look. There had been a string of burglaries one town over. In the last one, a young girl had been home alone and caught him trying to break in. She came face to face with him through a window. She ran and hid in the closet while she called 911. The guy actually still broke into the house and left muddy footprints all over. He didn't take anything. I thought maybe he was looking for the girl because it looked like he had checked under the beds. They believed he had fled in a truck stolen from a neighboring house that was burglarized the same day. The girl had described him as a young white male with a beard and long sandy blonde hair tucked up in a ponytail. Sure enough, the police came back the next morning. They had found the stolen truck abandoned and out of gas a couple of streets over. It had some stolen electronics in the back, and apparently it also had a bunch of women's clothing that he must have taken from the houses as well. They didn't say underwear, but I assume that's what they meant. They took pictures and lifted fingerprints. The cop told us that he had most likely been scoping out the neighborhood when my mom saw him. He chose our house because there were woods all around it. He had probably waited in the woods and watched the cars leave before trying to break in. That was when it started to dawn on me that if my dad hadn't gotten home right when he did, or if he had let me stay home while he picked up my brother, I would have probably been home alone when the guy tried to break in. This guy had already broken into one house when he knew a little girl was home. Needless to say, I didn't want to stay home alone for a little while after that. A couple of days later, I was playing outside with the neighborhood kids. We went to hang out in the fort we built in the woods that overlooked my backyard and found around 20 cigarette butts inside. The guy must have hidden out in my fort and watched our house all afternoon and evening until he saw both cars leave. If I hadn't gotten that Nintendo 64 for my birthday a few days earlier, I would have almost definitely been playing in the woods that day. I also wouldn't have wanted to stay home alone though. So, my Nintendo both saved my life and nearly got me killed. To the guy with the long sandy blonde hair, we came really close, but definitely let's not me ever. This is closing in on around 10 years ago. I've also since moved from where this happened and I don't have any of the saved docs that are/were related to it due to trying to forget about some of it. Despite that, a friend of mine tipped me off to this subreddit because she was a means of support during all of this, so here I am. I still bring it up occasionally to people to warn them of how creepy customers can be. I was the friendly neighborhood video game store worker at the time in my early 20s, and also the only non-dude worker there. There were plenty of shy teen boys who would blush and stumble over their words when they talked. Lots of "I've never met a girl who was into video games as you" comments, etc. But also plenty of creeper guys that of course always mistook my "I'm paid to be nice to you" and giving customer service as me being totally into them. And therefore, my not being a huge bitch meant that obviously I wanted to jump their bones. Thankfully, my coworkers would help nip that whatever they could, always telling guys when they were taking it too far, / that I'm too nice to everyone, and having to be blunt that I'm being a good customer service worker, not a flirt, and to stop harassing me. But there was this one dude that was just so sneaky in how he went from a creep to a literal nightmare. It started off that all my coworkers thought he was a great customer and general great guy because he was some kind of big brother caretaker to a bunch of kids that were mostly mentally disabled and had learning disabilities. He'd occasionally bring them to the store and buy them a new game or games for the consoles they had at the home that they came from. At first, I too let my guard down around this guy because obviously a caretaker of disabled children wouldn't be a creep, right? Wrong. Whenever the kids would be meandering around and looking at new games or playing the demo games we had in store, he liked to talk to us that were working at the time while he was there. It started innocently enough, but at first I just took it that he was really charismatic and upbeat, which was nice to see with someone that helped with kids who could definitely be considered difficult. We saw our fair share of meltdowns in the store with the kids he brought, but he was very good with them at de-escalating them when they did. But soon his visits became more frequent and his charisma started definitely to lean more towards straight up flirting. My coworkers even noted aloud that they had seen him come in more often than he did before. They hadn't yet put two and two together and realized that it was because I started working there. There was one specific visit when he came in when I was the only one in the store at the time. Coworker was on his lunch. That the flirting suddenly went into high gear. I don't remember exactly what he said, but it was very, very forward and made me balk. I couldn't believe what he had said. I immediately, albeit politely, shut him down. I had to keep it calm and cool because I didn't want to rile up the kids. Despite this shutdown, he didn't stop. He started coming in more, using the kids as a reason to keep trying to bother me. It became suddenly nefarious pretty quickly. Those poor kids had no idea and legitimately thought he was giving them more attention / doting on them because he liked them, but that definitely wasn't the case anymore. He straight up told me. Again, he was so sneaky and seemed like he always knew when one of my coworkers was taking a lunch, despite it never being at the same time, that the kids were just an excuse to come see my beautiful self. After this comment, I immediately told my coworkers and boss. They believed me, but at the same time didn't think it was very serious. However, I forced them to start using signals that we'd give each other and call with a specific phrase if I needed them to come back to the store ASAP, because the creep showed up. I also asked if we should try and find out the organization that he was going through with the kids to let them know what he said about them, but my boss freaked out about getting that involved. Then one day I had opened by myself and it was super slow, so I was alphabetizing the racks of games out on the floor. We had a bell tied to our front door, but there was a side entrance you could come in through that was attached to a video / movie rental store. The movie store side had a sort of metal gate thing that you had to usually open a bit to get inside, so that made noise too. I was relying on that to alert me if I had a customer and was in the zone of alphabetizing because I didn't hear anyone come into the store. Then I heard what I thought was my coworker coming in for the day, a bit early, not uncommon for them, and give me a fake flirty compliment of, "Hey there, sexy thing," which was usually our way of goofing off with each other when nobody was around. He also knew how to open the side door without making a racket, as all of us workers did. So I mock flirted a reply back to the extent of, "Haven't I told you before that compliments will get you nowhere and everywhere at the same time?" And turned, only for my jaw to drop, eyes to get huge, and I could feel the color leave my face, and I swear I could feel my organs get heavy inside my body. It was not my coworker. It was the creep, literally mimicking my coworker's goofy voice to a damn T. He also knew the specific way to open the side door without making a noise. I forced myself to laugh, which honestly I think sounded more like a dying crow, and was like, "Oh, I thought you were my coworker. Sorry about that." Only for him to reply, "I know you did, but I like the response you gave me anyway," with a smile. Cue the skin crawliest of skin crawls. I hopped up and scrambled back behind our cases that separated the workers and the customers so I could at least have some kind of barrier between us. I asked him where the kids were and he told me he purposely didn't bring them today, that he was there to see me. I of course tried to feign ignorance at first and was like, "Oh, did you need to return something I sold you the other day?" But he laughed at me again, super forwardly, started flirting with me and asked me out. Keep in mind, I was the only one in the game store and the worker in the movie store side, which was a huge ass store by the way, was way far away. Even if I for some reason needed to scream for help, there was no way anyone would ever been able to help me in time. I don't do flight in the fight or flight option, so I started to get a bit of an adrenaline rush in preparing for the possibility that I might need to fight if he didn't take another rejection well. So again, I rejected him, told him that I wasn't interested, as nice as he seemed, gag, and I had an SO. He only smiled again and said I have a significant other too, and that it doesn't mean anything to him. They don't have to know about us or each other, he said. I was floored. This guy was not taking no for an answer no matter what, and he's a cheater. I honestly wasn't at all surprised at that part though. At this point, I'm also getting really angry. I'm gripping the register so hard that my hands are turning white. I remembered this clearly because I ended up making my hand sore after, and I said to him really firm/bluntly, but still politely because I was afraid he could somehow get me in trouble because I was at work. That again, I'm not interested and I'm not a cheater, and that I especially needed him to stop doing this to me because it makes me highly uncomfortable and I'm just trying to do my job. Thankfully, I think the worker on the movie side sensed something was up, came over purposely shaking the door to make lots of noise, and was like, "Hey, my name. How's your morning been?" While staring intently at the creep from behind because they realized who it was. That seemed to do the trick for the time being because the creep then said, "I'll let you get back to work," with the slimiest smugness in existence, and left. Once he was out of the store and in his car/away, I started just yelling my head off about him to the movie side worker and immediately called my coworker who was supposed to come in soon and my boss. The movie worker was the assistant manager on their side of the store, so they also discussed it with everybody on their side to try and keep an eye out for him. We had a meeting about it and it was agreed that the next time Creep was in the store, kids or not, he would be warned by either the manager or assistant manager that if he didn't leave me alone or only discuss actual game/store or sale information in the store, if I happened to be the only one around, he would be banned from the store. Then the creep didn't show up for a while. I thought maybe finally he took no for an answer and moved on. It had been a little over a month since he was last there that I reported, and my coworker said he hadn't been in on my days off either. It was summertime at that point. It's Texas and our AC was broke. It was damn miserable and I had to work for a few hours by myself because somebody had called out for the gateway shift between me and the closer for the night. I had my uniform sleeves rolled up, was trying to roll up my pants up to my knees, and I had my hair pulled up. Now I've had an undershave, aka the lower half of my head hair is shaved, but the upper half is a full head of hair that went down, and can hide the undershave easily, forever, and usually I don't have it up or exposed at work, just in case a customer or another store manager had an issue with it, but it was unbearable this day, and I had it pulled up fully exposing the undershave, to give my neck and head some kind of relief from the sweatshop my store was. I was price labeling newly released games that were on display behind the register, so I had my back to the movie side of the store because, again, there was the bell in the front entrance and the gate thing in the middle to warn me if somebody was coming. I also didn't really have my back turned for long periods at a time because I would pause, look around, and keep going. I was leaning back against one of the cases as I was labeling because there was a fan we had blowing behind the registers and trying to get some air up my folded pant legs, lol, and apparently let my guard down for just a smidge too long. Next thing I know, I feel a hand sliding up the back of my neck, caressing it and then cupping the back of my head. This is all the undershave area, by the way, and sort of resting their thumb and index finger up under and around my ponytail / the beginning of my hairline of regular length hair, in a very I could easily grab you by this hair right now, relaxed position. While this only lasted for maybe a second, it felt like time slowed and went on for years. I'm pretty sure I had hairs turn instantly white after that. I whirled around and jerked away as violently as I could and used the game in my hand to immediately break the connection between the hand and my head, and glared at whoever thought doing that was some kind of prank. You guessed it, the creep. He sarcastically was shaking his hand like it hurt, that I smacked with the game, and said, "I didn't know you assaulted your customers." I was so instantly furious and so nauseous that he touched me like that. Despite it just being the back of my head, it was incredibly violating. I couldn't get words to form. I was so ready to lunge over the cases and beat him to a pulp. So he said, "Nice haircut. You into that kinky stuff? I like that. I also liked what you said to me the last time when you thought I was your friend. I want to hear some more." In which, that was what I needed to snap back into reality to start yelling at him, top of my lungs. But it was effective as it immediately sent one of the workers from the movie store running over and him running out. I called my coworker that was coming in later and my boss. My boss called the district manager, who advised calling security for the shopping center we were in. We got a pretty crap shot of his face from our store camera. It was cheap and poor quality, but it was all we had to post at the front of the storefronts that he was a banned customer and report if somebody saw him immediately. The security guards for the shopping center were all updated at that point, as well on who to look for. Everybody, both the game and movie sides, all worked together to make sure I wasn't alone for any shift, and made sure I had rides to and from my nearby apartment to the store. I lived walking distance. But that wasn't the end, and it somehow got worse from there. For the security report and to log it with the company, my boss pulled up the account the creep used to buy his game/had his membership card under. We quickly learned it was a fake name. The phone number given was inactive, and we didn't ever have to ID him or have a credit/debit card on file because 1, he always paid cash, and 2, he always bought rated E games for the kids he brought in. Keep in mind, this video game store chain also no longer exists, and they were never really on top of keeping up with the newest technology or security measures. All of us tried to remember the name of the company/group he worked for being a mentor/caretaker of the kids, but we couldn't. He had worn a shirt related to it one time, but mostly it was just sort of a known thing that he had mentioned from time to time. We also couldn't really call various groups and ask about him with a fake name, and if I wanted to try and call/email around to the ones that were located where I was in Texas to give them a picture, I was told the police would have to be involved/it might go legal. I was poor and honestly just wanted to be done with it, so I didn't push it that far, hoping that everything else done so far would resolve it. Then the calls began. Calling the store from different numbers, different people, usually kids asking if I was working. Except they never got my name right. It became very obvious they were scanning to try and see when I was working, but the creep didn't seem to remember my name. But he'd make children call the store to seem innocent, since my coworkers/management knew they were kids who loved interacting with me, and I was their favorite. And I had favorite customers too, of course. My coworkers would say, "No one named," or "wrong name works here," and they'd always follow up with, "She's the only girl that works there." You know what I mean. But my coworkers started telling whoever called that there was more than one girl that worked there, but none with the name they gave. Then they would always hang up immediately. I had one coworker who was so angry for me. B, if you're out there as a Redditor and recognize this story in this part, I miss you, dude. That he started saving the numbers that called the store, and then would call them from essentially a burner phone after his shift, and while he never got an answer, would leave threatening messages. After he started doing that, the calls lessened and eventually stopped. It was during all of this as well that some of the teen/cool AF customers noticed the signs we had of the creep and asked about it. They were horrified for me and all made me want to cry from trying to band together to help me out. The regular teen customers especially. They all lived nearby as well. There was an awkward moment when I realized quite a few of them lived in the same complex as me when I was trying to use the community pool, and noticed them all start going to the pool more often when I was using it. I used it less after that, lol, and said they keep an eye out for me, especially if they happened to see me going to or from work. They knew exactly what the creep looked like since multiple times they had seen him around when they were hanging out. Then one night, a little while after I had gotten a ride home, there was a knock at my door. I saw that it was the police. I answered, startled, and the officer started asking me questions about the creep. Apparently, some of the kids who said they keep an eye out were good on their word and saw the creep slowly riding around my apartment complex in his car while they were hanging outside. Not long after I had closed the store and gotten a ride home, seeming like he was trying to find out which building I was in. They immediately called the cops and tried to block him in until they got there, but he probably recognized them as well and sped out. They were able to get a vague description of his car. It was nighttime and he had all of his lights off, like a damn creep, and at least a partial plate number, but it unfortunately never amounted to anything. The cops came to the store the next day when the store opened to meet with the security guards and exchange information and file a full report. I gave them what information I had at my apartment obviously, but they needed to follow up with the guards and the info they had. I sobbed when I saw the kids come in to check on me and hug them all, as they very easily could have gotten themselves hurt or killed trying to help me out. The police I talked to, who followed up with me a few times with, unfortunately no info, they kept running into more fake names and info, and they didn't ever find the car he was seen in, confirmed that when they also asked some other people in the apartment complex. People had seen that car and that behavior more than once on different days. He was waiting to catch me going to my apartment. Thankfully, that was the end of the creep saga. at least as far as I know. I never found out his real name. If I did, I'd have to press charges if possible, and he never was seen going into the store or other stores of the same chain ever again. Most of the kids that he had brought in also never came back. There was one that I specifically remembered coming in that I, trying not to bombard her, asked his new guardian if she knew the name of the previous guardian/caretaker the kid came in with, or the name of where his group home was before. Unfortunately, the kid was unable to speak really or comprehend even basic questions, so he couldn't be asked/didn't respond to the sign that we had up with the creep's picture. And she said that he had just come into a new care house and she didn't know where he was before. She said that she would also try to find out for me, but nothing came of that either. I always wondered if he ever took advantage of or hurt those kids. I really hope not. It's something I mentioned to the police, but I don't even know how much they were able to do, being as all the info we had about him was fake. Shortly after all that died down, I moved, and while I stayed at that store for a while longer, I eventually transferred to a closer store to where I lived, only for the company to eventually start to go under. So, creepy customer stalker man, let's not meet ever again. I'll start off by saying that this story is 100% true. I've never shared this online, but this sub has inspired me to do so here it goes. I'm 28. I grew up in Miami, Florida. Not the Miami that you're used to seeing on TV. My family lived far away from the glitz and glam of South Beach. I was living in an area called the Redlands, which was mostly rural farmland and nurseries. My parents moved there shortly after Hurricane Andrew destroyed most of the area, with hopes of buying a destroyed home and fixing it up for our family to live in. While living in the Redlands, I attended school and was enrolled in gifted classes. I fit in pretty well with the class, mostly intelligent kids in a program that was fairly experimental in Dade County at the time. I was befriended by two kids, Mario and Jimmy. We became really good friends, inseparable even, during school hours and after class. One evening, my family was eating dinner and we got a phone call from my buddy Mario's mom. Nobody had seen Jimmy around and was wondering if he'd come to my house. My mom said no, and Mario's mom proceeded to tell her that Jimmy had been missing since after school. Fast forward a few weeks, and a full-blown manhunt ensues for Jimmy. Kid vanished, nowhere to be found. While the search is on, my brother and I continue to attend school. I missed school one day. I was sick, and my little brother went to school without me. We took a bus to school. After school, the bus would drop us off about a half-mile away from our house. Our stop had about 10 kids, who all went their separate ways from the stop. Well, the bus dropped my little brother off, and he started walking home by himself when a van pulled up to my brother as he was walking. My mother was at a distance watching my brother walk home. He was only 8 at the time, as the van pulled up and stopped. The man in the van said he knew where our house was and said he'd take my brother to the house up the road. As my brother was setting foot in the van, a retired police officer who lived in a trailer down the road saw my brother and screamed out, scaled his fence on the property, and scared off the driver of the van. My little brother was confused and upset that he still had to walk. The officer took my brother back to the house and explained that the van was described as a suspicious vehicle amongst law enforcement. It was believed to be the van of the man who allegedly kidnapped my friend Jimmy. Well, it was. They found my friend Jimmy Rice chopped up in pieces in this man's home, and his van was on the property. My little brother was almost abducted by a man who murdered and chopped up my best friend in 5th grade. You can even Google Jimmy Rice and read up on him and his family's foundation. Sad and very scary story, and a warning to anyone with kids. It can happen to anyone. This happened 2 years ago at my high school, which shall not be named, when I was a freshman. Yesterday in my chemistry class, the teacher was talking about it and it gave me the chills. I go to a medium-sized school with about 400 students per class. However, we only have about 100 students enrolled in AP Physics every year, so we only have one teacher for the subject. The longtime physics teacher retired, so the school board hired somebody that we will call Mr. Sykes. Get it? Haha. Anyways, from the first day of school, everybody could tell he was, well, different. He would blow up over the smallest things, such as somebody writing a formula wrong. Just go absolutely ballistic. The first week of school, he made over 5 students cry because of his outbursts. My chemistry teacher is the science department leader, so She was very disturbed by these actions. One day, she was going to talk to him about this and if he needed to make some changes or if the students needed remediation. He was not in his room, but she found a pillow and a sleeping bag and some of his clothes hanging in the teacher locker every room has. This seemed a little bit suspicious, but she did not overthink it and had forgot about it. Fast forward to December, my teacher's son was in the marching band for school and she had to pick him up around 11 p.m. due to a game very far away. She noticed his car was still there. This made her grow more suspicious because, really? What teacher would be there at 11 p.m. on a Saturday night? As the following week went on, Mr. Sykes' outbursts got worse, and the students began to fear him more. The following Saturday, my teacher's kids were sick with the stomach bug, so she went to good old Walmart for some ginger ale, and on the way home, she decided to drive by the school to see if Mr. Sykes' car was still there, and sure enough, it was. The following week, the physics students were notified that Mr. Sykes would be leaving that week, and they could either drop the class without a penalty on their transcript or take it online. The first day of Christmas break, the janitor who was cleaning the school texted my teacher and said Mr. Sykes was standing in his empty classroom, staring at the wall. She said if he were still there when he left, to call the principals and possibly the police. He was there 5 hours later, staring at the wall. My principals and the police had to end up coming and escorting him out. A week later, my teacher was checking the supplies in the room, making sure everything was okay for the write-up. As she was going through his drawers, she found various items such as razors, rat poison, and acids. Who knows what he was planning to do with them? So, Mr. Sykes, let's never meet again. When I was 14 and a freshman in high school, I had some pretty intense behavioral issues. I was partying constantly and getting into fights with my parents. Little did they know I was also doing drugs. Most of my friends were seniors due to me being on a varsity team, and hanging out with 18-year-olds wasn't helping my behavior improve much. My parents, at their wits' end, decided to try one more thing before military school. A week-long sailing experience out in the ocean that would teach participating kids discipline. The boat would not dock. We'd been in open water for 7 days. I was the youngest girl on the boat. There were 2 other girls, one 16 and one 17, and probably 5 or 6 boys between 15 and 18. The rest were crew, who we referred to as counselors. There was only one bathroom on the boat, and it was directly in front of the girls' bunks. As in, we were laid out right in front of the door, and anybody who used the toilet in the middle of the night would pass within a foot of us to enter the little stall. The very first night, one of the counselors got fixated on me. Obviously, every kid there had problems, but I was by far the youngest and female and clearly didn't know anyone. He sat next to me all through dinner up on deck, talking to me despite me trying to read the one book I'd brought, and he decided to hang out below deck with the kids after dinner. I tried to be polite, but anybody watching us could tell I was weirded out. Eventually, the counselor revealed that he was 19, and one of the other boys got on his ass about making me uncomfortable. "She's 14, bro," etc. The counselor sort of backed off after that, but I was worried he was watching me for days after. Unfortunately for me, one of the other boys amongst the participating kids decided he wanted to get to know me better. I was friendly to him at first as I didn't come to the program with any friends, and it was a long, lonely week, but things got weird fast. When I eventually told him I wasn't interested in him romantically, he threw a tantrum, yelling about how there's no love on this boat, and he couldn't wait to get back to the hosts, he said. His friends told him to leave it, but he was angry the rest of the week. I tried to just ice him out and pretend it wasn't getting to me. I became so paranoid, especially at night, that I had trouble sleeping. I gladly took the late watch shifts up on deck because it kept me out of that damp, claustrophobic space where I constantly felt off. Unsafe, I guess. I just had a feeling that something was wrong. At the end of the week, all of the kids exchanged kicks so we could keep in touch. Immediately after I got home, I received a message from one of the weird kids' friends, and he told me that I was right to feel uncomfortable around the weird boy because he was watching me sleep. Apparently, the boy was so mad at me for rejecting him that he would stand at the edge of where the girl slept. The weird boy's friend only did it with him once, but got uncomfortable when the weird boy suggested they unzip my sleeping bag and pull down my pants while I was sleeping. The friend went back to sleep on the boy's side and left the weird boy to watch me. Weird boy was 17, at least a foot taller than me, and had 70 pounds on me easily. I couldn't have done a damn thing if he actually decided to do more than just watch. I didn't sleep well in group settings for years afterwards. I still think about how there was a time when I was 14 years old and unaware that somebody had stood over me watching me. Counselor and weird boy on the boat, and also friend of the weird boy who didn't do anything. Despite knowing what the weird boy was doing, let's not meet. I'm posting here to make sure that this is recorded at least somewhere in case anything happens. I will go into only the required amount of details of the environment per what is stated in the rules. Was driving out of Nowheresville for spring break at around 1 to 3 a.m. with a friend named Jeb and had to stop for utilities just off the highway. Let's just say that this stop was far from any type of civilization, which I'll get to. The gas station was closed, so we decided to go in the bushes. For context, it was in the middle of a severe thunderstorm. It felt like driving through a constant car wash. As we are relieving ourselves, Jeb says, "Hey, can you see that giant rock poking through those woods on that hill?" Me. Yeah, I can, just barely though." Jeb, look on top of it. There was a barely visible outline of a person standing on top of the rock. You could tell they were trying their best to stand perfectly still, yet also having a staring contest with us. It was clear that they weren't wearing any sort of attire for the rain. Of course, we sprint back to the car. Jeb, I think it was a girl, but it's so hard to see in this rain. Me, a car beats some randa without a car 9 times out of 10, so let's find out. We pull out and were able to angle the car so that the brights could point at the rock. We knew it made a little difference in the storm, but tried anyways. The lights barely revealed 2 grown men working together to both drag something large and appeared to be digging behind the rock from our view. Both were in completely blacked out clothes. We could tell they were definitely okay with getting soaked. What sent chills down our spine, other than seeing the one originally, was that for the split second they looked back at our lights. Both were wearing what appeared to be Halloween masks, or at least something covering their faces that looked like it. Could have been dark painted hockey masks. Before they were able to drag the large trash bag looking thing fully behind the rock. Words cannot describe how fast I got back into the highway. There were no other cars in the area, and we could tell that the woods were isolated to just a patch beside the highway. Still not sure what it was we saw, but the conditions lined up perfectly to have no witnesses. I couldn't come up with a logical reason for this, so I hoped others here might have one. This happened while in my early 20s. My best friend was always getting into risky stuff. While she did various drugs, I was always more of a pothead. When they said pot was a gateway drug, I believed it's true to a certain extent with those who have addictive personalities. She definitely developed an addiction issue later on. My friend, her name was Kay, was always down to meet people. She used to find random people on Facebook or Instagram. She would ask me to hang out so that way when she met people, I was the buffer just in case they didn't like each other. One day she came over to my house unannounced and was like, "Hey, let's go to my uncle's house," because her aunt was there and her aunt had some goods. Her aunts happened to be down the road, and her aunt and uncle were known as dealers in the area, so we went. When we got there, she was like, "Hey, I met this guy online. He goes by Joey Crack." Then she shows her aunts his pictures. A wide-set man with a goofy red face, cornrow braids, face tattoos, and a gold grill. I laughed and said, "Wow, okay, you really know how to pick 'em." She'd already invited him over, so upon his arrival, he comes out of nowhere, just walks right up and gives Kay a hug, and everybody yells their kiss on the cheek. In this part of town, there was nothing around, just houses, a school, and woods. The closest store is probably 20 minutes away, so it struck me as odd that he walked here. So it was me, Kay, her aunt, and the aunt's friend. We sit and get 3 joints in rotation. By this time, both aunts are high as a kite on coke, and they take a few puffs and then go inside the house, leaving me, Kay, and Joey Crack outside. Joey then starts asking us questions like how we know each other, what we do for a living, and stuff like that. It was getting late, so I was telling her I was going to go home. She was like, "No, don't go yet." I told her I was tired and that Joey was weird, and he kept low-key hitting on me. She then tells me he asked to sleep with her and he wanted to ask her to ask if I was down. I laughed it off and said, "You're crazy." And after a while of silence, I deflated and heard some noise that was in the darkness. You heard that? After a bit of small talk between him and Kay, he then learned that neither of us was interested. It was just a hangout. This then turns the mood. You can feel it. It was suddenly eerily quiet. He got reserved and shifty-eyed. I sat down for a while just to please Kay. At one point, I turned to Joey, knowing that he walked here and it was dark by now. "What are you about to do?" "Because I'm about to go home and Kay's coming with me." He was like, "I just texted my boy. He's about to come get me." When he was texting, Kay was right behind him watching him text. Her eyes grew wide and she looked at me. That was silent girl code for, "Hey, WTF." Kay broke the silence and was like, "Hey, come help me get this thing from inside to bring it out." So I did. We went inside and she was like, "I'm going to call my uncle so he can take us to your place." And I was like, "Why?" My house was like a 10-minute walk. She said because when she was looking at Joey's text, he sent whoever was coming to pick him up the information of all of us here. He noted that her aunts were high on coke, as we were along with our age. He was telling his boy to come over to basically rob and rape us, and called dibs on the blonde one. I was the blonde one. Every hair stood up on my body with the thought of some gross goon trying to have his way with me. I was mad because she got me into this stuff. We came back out and continued our conversation with him so he wouldn't get suspicious of us. She mentions out loud that her uncle was on his way home. As he pulls in, a sigh of relief comes over me. They speak briefly, and Joey then departs into the darkness before his ride even shows up. Kay and I get a ride from her uncle to my house. On the ride, we noted how weird Joey was. Later that night, as I was going to bed, I checked my Facebook, and I had a friend request from Joey in a message. "You're so pretty. I would love some alone time with you without your friend." The message ended with his number. I never blocked somebody so fast. After this, Kay didn't learn her lesson, but that's another story for another time. A week later, Joey was in the news. He was wanted for SA, robbery, and drug possession. A bullet well missed on my part. Joey Crack, let's never meet again. This happened a few years ago when I was still living with my mom, and I had borrowed her car to go see my then boyfriend for the evening. It was around midnight when I got back to my neighborhood, so the roads were empty. And that's when I noticed this dirty, rundown, rusted white utility van that a maintenance guy would drive, following me. I never ever saw the driver's face, but I got this immediate sinking feeling in my stomach because something felt wrong about this van. Now, I was only 20 at the time, but I knew better than to just drive straight to my house and let this person know exactly where I live, no matter how desperately I wanted to just go home and ignore it. But I also wasn't 100% sure that they were actually following me yet. I didn't want to jump to conclusions just because it was late and I was alone and being paranoid. So I drove to a shopping complex a few minutes out of the way that's well lit and has a public library to see if I was followed there. I thought I lost the van but decided to wait in the parking lot for a few minutes because I had a bad feeling I just couldn't shake. Sure enough, the van showed up and was driving in random circles around the parking lot, looking for me. This scared me quite a bit, so I drove towards the big mall here that's always got security and police presence, because it was the midway point between where I was and where I lived. I parked in a pretty well lit, although empty 24-hour McDonald's parking lot where I had a great view of the roads and the mall, but I wasn't super easy to spot and waited to see if the van showed up looking for me. It did, and of course, this would be the one time the security and cops are nowhere to be found, which was half of the reason I decided to head there in the first place. Realizing whoever was driving this van was 100% actively following me in the middle of the night, I knew just driving home was not an option, and that's a terrifying realization. Luckily, the police station is just a few minutes from where I was, so I try and discreetly drive away, hoping the van hasn't noticed me yet. I wasn't that lucky because it wasn't long before the van was back in my rearview mirror. At this point, I'm panicking pretty hard and my anxiety is high. I finally pulled into the police station parking lot. Seconds later, the van came to a stop in the middle of the road for no more than a few seconds. I'm guessing just long enough for them to realize where I led them, and they took off immediately, and so fast. I did make it home safe and without seeing the van again not long after, but this whole ordeal took up at least an hour of my night. It was after 1 a.m. by the time I made it home, and I was terrified the whole time. I don't know what this guy's specific intention was, but honestly, I don't need to know. I know it was nothing good, and I likely avoided a very bad situation. If you think somebody is following you, it's not stupid or paranoid to make sure you aren't right. Who knows what might have happened if I had led them to my house or gotten out of the car. When I was 9 or 10, my mother had finally broken up with her wealthy yet abusive boyfriend. We had recently moved back to my hometown of Sacramento from Kingman, Arizona, and I was having trouble adjusting to our new life, where before we lived in big, nice houses in beautiful communities with very little crime. My mom, now a single mother of two, moved us into a small townhouse community in not the best of neighborhoods. Luckily, I'd met a girl at school I'd really connected with. By chance, she happened to live in a fourplex complex across the street, and we quickly became inseparable, as did our moms. Her mom was a lesbian, and her girlfriend was also a good friend of my mom's. It was not unusual for them to be at our house late into the night, them up drinking, laughing in the living room, and us giggling and gossiping about the boys at our school upstairs in my room. Well, this particular night was no different. It was pretty late, so we decided to just have a sleepover. My best friend and I ran across the street to her empty house to grab her blanket and sleepover bag. We were laughing as we walked up her driveway, but she stopped suddenly and all of the color drained from her face. Nobody was home, but all the lights were on in her house and the front door was wide open, while a shadow danced on the wall. Terrified, we ran back to my house and burst through the door, both crying and babbling about a man being in the house. My uncle, who happened to be staying with us for a short while, ran over, but when he got there, the door was shut and locked and the house was dark. The adults laughed and told us that we were imagining things and that we watched too many scary movies, that it was late and we were tired. We both knew what we saw though, and it never really left our minds. Weeks go by and strange things started happening in our house. Doors that were closed would be open when we came back. Things in their rooms would be rearranged. Clothes and underwear started going missing. Her mom's and her girlfriend's sex toys started going missing as well. Obviously, this was left untold to us, but they were still convinced that nothing weird was going on, until one night. It was late and I was spending the night. My older sister was babysitting us and we were playing Donkey Kong Country. We got bored and my best friend mentioned that she had Mario Kart in a box in the garage. The light was broken and their landlord was more of a slumlord and never fixed anything, so we grabbed flashlights and went to search. She knew the box was in the far back corner, so we made our way around piles of junk when she tripped and fell. She stood up and we both pointed our flashlights at what she fell over, and it was a pile of blankets. Those weren't hers. We realized that somebody had made a little cubby hidden in their barely ever used garage, and we also found a hole that led outside that somebody had sawed out. Needless to say, we screamed and ran inside, and my sister called 911 and her mom, who ran over to sit with us. Turns out somebody had been living in their garage for weeks, if not months. Since they didn't have a washer or dryer in there, they rarely, if ever, ventured in there, so nobody ever noticed. The hole the person saw in the wall faced the back of the building, and no one ever went back there, so it wasn't visible from the street or driveway. Worst of all, they found a ton of stuff in there that the person had been sneaking into the house to steal, like dirty underwear and the missing sex toys, food and pictures, etc. When he heard them leave and knew the house was empty, he would just come inside through the door and go through their things, eat their food, and use their bathroom. The guy never came back and they never caught him. The scariest part is that I spent the night there often, and who knows what could have happened had he been violent. Or maybe he was violent and waiting for the right time to strike. Luckily for us, we'll never have to know. So this was way back around 2 years ago when I was still struggling with trying to find a job and becoming financially stable. Anyways, my phone bill arrived and I had to pay it soon. I didn't want to be in debt, so I was trying to find a job for at least a quick buck. It was Sunday. In my country, most people aren't allowed to work on Sunday, and it was around 9 p.m. I also need to add that I was at my mother's house and had invited my friends over to hang out. That being said, I ended up having to look for a job ASAP. Lo and behold, I see an ad. Distributing leaflets will pay well, etc. I am doubtful, but called the person anyways. Here is more or less how the convo went. My mom and friend happened to hang around to listen in on the convo. Me. Hi, I'm calling about the offer. Guy. Yes. So, are you still looking to hire? Yes. I see, and how much would the pay be? How much would you like to be paid? He asked. At this point, my mother is waving her arms, trying to show how much. She's telling me to ask for 200 of our currency as a reference point. Usually in this job distributing leaflets, you'd be lucky to get, I don't know, around 16 of our currency per hour or so. Naturally, as you can imagine, I thought this was crazy. But hey, I honestly didn't think I would get the job, so what the heck. I go with it. Me. Well, how does 200 sound? Deal, he said. Totally pleasantly surprised. Oh, that's great. When can I start? Tell me where you live and I'll be there in 20 minutes. You want me to work now? Yes. On a Sunday? Yes. At 9 o'clock in the evening? Yes. Tell me where you live so I can come and pick you up. Me. Obvious red flags, not wanting to tell him where I live. Pick me up at the crossing between this and that street, I said. Okay, I will be there in 20 minutes. Well, I would like to know what the job is exactly. You said leaflets, but what leaflets? I'll tell you when I pick you up. I'd rather know this in advance, I said. Look, I'm going all the way to meet you. We will talk when I pick you up. Reluctantly, I say okay. A huge part of me wanted to drop the phone, but another part of me was thinking, hey, as unlikely as it might seem, it still might be legit, so I went halfway and just told him to meet me at a crossing a bit further away from where my mother lives. I hatched a plan. First of all, I am not going into a stranger's car just like that. That is sketchy as heck. Secondly, who the heck hires a leaflet guy for such an insanely high pay? And third of all, a person who doesn't want to talk about the details before picking them up is definitely up to something. So I hatch a plan. I tell my mother and friends I hang around in the area where I'm supposed to meet the guy so that he will either try not to do anything since there are witnesses, or they can call the cops should anything happen. Plus, my friends would have my back. Okay, so 20 minutes pass by, and a black, of course, SUV rolls on the crossing that is empty of all cars and people because, of course, it's Sunday evening. The window rolls down. The guy pops his head out and signals to me to get in the car. I, of course, refuse and tell him I need to talk about the details regarding the job first. I look through the guy's opened window and see some chick sitting beside him. Guy, come on, I haven't got time for this. Me, I'm sorry, but I don't know you. I'm not going to get into a stranger's car just like that. Guy, in a fake laughing tone, what am I going to do? Kidnap you? Me, I don't know you. You're a stranger to me, and if you want, we can talk about the details about the job, and then I will tell you if I'll get in the car or not. The guy's face grows red. I already know things are going to take a turn for the worse. He rolls up his window, screeches his car down one of the roads, parks it next to the nearest free spot, and gets out of the car. The guy had a comically large beer belly, and he started angrily stomping toward me. I think to myself, playing the angry card, are we? He gets closer to my face than anyone would ever dream of and starts his spiel. I drove all the way through the city to pick you up, and now you tell me you won't get in the car. Me, barely calm. I already told you, no offense to you, but I don't know you. You are expecting me to get into the car with a complete stranger. If you would like, we can talk about further job details right now, after which I will tell you whether I will accept the job or not. Guy, again repeating himself. What am I going to do? Kidnap you? Well, I don't know that, do I? I said. The guy's face reddens even more. He plays the I'm too pissed off to talk to you, my friend. Good cop will talk to you instead. As he tells me just that, and we walk to his car. Still, I don't get into the car where I talk to Miss Good Cop, at a safe distance from the car. The lady seems kind and polite. Finally, she explains how it all works. That they give me leaflets to a nightclub, which is why they are doing this at the time, since all the nightclubs are open right now. They drive me to a location where I give away the leaflets for an hour or two, and afterwards, once I'm finished, I call them to pick me up, and they pay me 100 of our currency. Note that the guy already said okay for 200. Yeah, no. You really expect me to believe that I will just get into a stranger's car and then just be dropped off, assuming I'm not being kidnapped, who knows where, do a job without a contract, and then be gullible enough to think that if I call them after the job is done, they won't just ghost me and not pay me. What the heck are they smoking? Once the lady explained everything, I politely declined. The guy keeps trying to butt in with this. What am I gonna do? Kidnap you? Spiel over and over again. But I just BS my way out of it by saying some crap along the lines of, well, you say you are very busy and don't have time for this, so I don't want to waste any of your time on this. Goodbye. The guy clearly had enough, gets in the car, smashes the door, and drives off with a screech. I hope I never meet those people again. This story is about my dad's ex-girlfriend. My dad has horrible luck with women, and he is like a crazy magnet. Every woman that he has ever dated, except his current girlfriend, has been abusive both mentally and physically. This list includes my mom. But this story is about his last girlfriend named Mary. She has gone from stalking not only him, but also me, my husband, and our daughter too. They met at a Christmas party and hit it off. He had just gotten out of another bad relationship with a different woman that he had been on and off with for about 3 years. She was the classic narcissist type. Well, Mary seems different. She claimed that she was also just out of an abusive relationship. They went out for a few months, but she never let Dad over to her place. He didn't find it all that weird until he received a call from a man who said that Mary was his wife and wanted to know how did my dad know her. At first, Dad thought this guy was her ex still trying to control her, but things started to add up. He finally confronted Mary and she gave him some sob story about how her ex was refusing to sign the papers, but they were separated. Dad did a bit of digging and even talked to Mary's parents at one point. He found out that not only was Mary definitely still married, but she wasn't even separated from her husband. As far as everybody in her life knew, she was happily married and my dad was just a friend, if they knew about him at all. Needless to say, he broke up with her. She lost it. Started showing up at his work, calling in the middle of the night and texting him 50 plus times a day. All of that good stuff. My dad missed dates twice and changed his number several times to try and get away from her, but she always found him. Love letters would arrive in the mail, or she would call and say she was coming to see him. Then she found my phone number, probably sometime after my dad moved in with me. She started texting me almost as much as him. Once I married my husband and had my daughter, she really went all out, sending me presents for her new granddaughter, always wanting updates and the like. I never replied and either sent back unopened packages or donated the items she had sent directly to me from shops. Everything finally came to a head when she arrived on my dad's doorstep while he was at work with a casserole for him. She gave it to his roommate and told him it was because she noticed my dad was losing weight. He told his roommate to toss it. He didn't want to risk poison since he just applied for a restraining order. That same night, she showed up at my apartment while my husband worked the overnight shift. It was after 1 a.m. when she started knocking on my door. I was glad that I had sent my toddler to my aunt and uncle's for the night when I saw it was her. She left banana bread on my doorstep that we threw out as soon as my husband got home. The next night, I again left my toddler with my aunt and uncle in case she came back. She did. I started getting texts from her as she pounded on my door. She wanted to see her grandbaby and have some girl time with me. They slowly devolved into demands for me to open up the door. I called the cops. While I was on the phone with dispatch, my neighbor came out ready to take her on. He told her cops were on the way since his wife was already calling them. She disappeared pretty quick into the park across the street. The cops didn't catch her, but my dad's restraining order did get granted. We have since moved across the state, but she still texts me from time to time, wanting to know how my dad is or what my daughter is up to. I never answer, but I do save all of her texts just in case I have to get my own restraining order as well. I just finished reading a post that reminded me of a story I think belongs here. So enjoy. About 8-ish years ago, I, 23 female, was in high school, about 15 at the time. I don't really remember honestly because I've done my best to block this from memory. Growing up, I was very distant and kept to myself when it came to my family due to unrelated things that I won't bother to post here. But this distance caused me to seek attention and make friends online. My parents were divorced, and my dad was married to this racist lady that lived 2 hours away in the middle of nowhere. I rarely visited because screw them. There was nothing to do there either, so I occupied myself with chat rooms. On one visit, I met this guy who was 19 named DJ. We hit it off right away. After a few days of chatting nonstop, we exchanged numbers to text because the internet sucked in the middle of nowhere. He was the perfect messaging buddy. He was interesting and funny and kept my mind off where I was at. After a few weeks, we would be on the phone every night. Literally on the phone for 12 hours when I didn't have school, from 11 p.m. till 11 a.m. the next morning. I was a night owl. His voice seemed pretty deep for a 19-year-old. But when I mentioned it to him, he said he got that a lot. He would send me pictures and I thought he was cute, so we started dating. I really got attached to this dude. DJ lived in Chicago and had kind of strict parents, so he would hang out at his Uncle Frank's house a lot. Frank was a cool dude. Funny like DJ and also witty and just an uncle that I wish I had. Somehow I started texting Frank too because he was worried about DJ and was asking me questions about him. Apparently, DJ started hanging around the wrong crowd and smoking weed and drinking, sneaking out, etc., and his uncle wanted to steer him back on the right track. A bit before I started texting Frank, DJ and I would go on Skype. DJ's computer didn't have a webcam, but mine did. He would be on speaker and we would have one way you know what. He was pretty descriptive though, to be honest. It did bother me because I wanted to see him too, but I was a dumb teenager so I overlooked it. I kept hearing camera noises and was suspicious that DJ was screenshotting me and told him if he was, that I wouldn't do this for him anymore. He told me that if he were screenshotting it wouldn't make a noise and it's his phone going off. I believed him. So after months of being invested in this guy I really liked, I looked him up on Facebook, even though he told me from the beginning he didn't have one, and there he was. First profile that showed up. It was DJ. I added him and messaged him. Hey, I thought you didn't have a Facebook. Who is this? Who do you think it is? Stop messaging me. Bye, he said. Obviously confused, I texted DJ and was like, ? So you don't know me on Facebook? He was confused and I told him I just tried adding him on Facebook, but he was acting brand new. He apologized profusely and said it was his cousin that his family wanted him to marry. Arranged marriages to cousins are normal in our culture, so I was heartbroken, but I bought it. He said that she had access to his Facebook, so she and his family could keep tabs on him. It went with this story, and I just stopped using Facebook to contact him. I really don't know how the rest unfolded because I honestly did a pretty good job of blocking this from all of my memory, so bear with me for the next part, please. DJ got arrested with weed and a scale in his trunk, so they got him with intent to sell. Frank was giving me the rundown, saying that DJ was sneaking out and going to parties, and that he probably won't be responding for a bit. I finally got DJ to friend me on Facebook and noticed that Facebook DJ wasn't the DJ I knew, and Facebook DJ had a girlfriend. I was very heartbroken again, but confused about him having a relationship when his family was strict and wanted him to marry his cousin. I finally put two and two together and realized that I was being catfished. The night I confronted him, we were on the phone, and after I finally poked holes in his story over and over, he confessed. He told me to get on Skype and he would turn on his webcam. I was horrified. It was Frank, his 50-year-old uncle. I call him Frank because he looks exactly like Danny DeVito and It's Always Sunny. I couldn't watch that show for years. I was so horrified. I was so physically upset that I went to the bathroom and started barfing. It turns out I've been doing all that with a pedophile for the better part of a year. The pics he was sending me were of his actual nephew. What the heck, dude? It was so surreal. I didn't know what to do. I closed my laptop and cried hysterically until the sun rose. I couldn't eat for days, and now I know I was in shock. I had nobody to go to. I didn't go to the police because I didn't want people finding out. After some months, he started blackmailing me with the naked screenshots of our Skype calls. He told me he would leak my photos to people I knew and on Facebook. I, of course, had blocked him, but I started talking to him again out of fear and probably Stockholm Syndrome or something of the sort. I eventually blocked him for good after talking to Frank off and on for another year. But still, Frank tries to contact me, the last message being 12 a.m. January 1st, 2018.